Hi, it's Dr. Saira, and I want to talk to you today about judgment and love. So let's get into this. Um, the Expansion Project is a community that we've launched a few weeks ago, and it's a place where people who are interested in personal growth and spiritual development and these really kind of big esoteric concepts are coming together to find a place to have conversations. And so every Thursday, we do a program called Ask Dr. Saira, where people come and ask a question, and then I kind of give my thoughts and my feedback. So this morning, the question, what we did, what's called a focus person. So a focus person is somebody who kind of asks a question, and everybody in the group kind of gets some benefit or some learning from whatever comes up with that question. And this is a really common process in group work, where you have one person kind of asking a question, everybody's learning and receiving from the responses, because they're kind of applying it to their own life and seeing how it fits for them. So the question that came up today was around family members and how to extend love to those who are a bit harder to love, and also how to make sense of what seems to the egoic mind to be unfair in family systems, right? So one person seems to get it all and another person is struggling, and how do we make sense of that? And how do we extend love to those who are harder to love? So that's kind of the theme that came up today. And, it really had me thinking about my own story and my own personal journey with the perceived unfairness of within family systems. So, in my own life story, in that of my closest loved ones, it feels like there's this disparity where one person seems to get all the golden nuggets and one person seems to constantly get coal in their stocking. And it's like, this doesn't feel fair. And I'm the person who gets the golden nuggets. And my brother is actually the person who seems to always get the coal. And it's like anything bad that could happen, anything challenging that could happen has happened for him. And it's like he just never catches a break, right? And for many years, I judged him for that. I'm like, well, if you just did what I do, then you'd be fine. Then you would just listen, just obey, just do what you're told, and you'll be fine. So when I was younger, it was very much like trying to get him to just cooperate. That was my solution. Just fix him, just change his personality altogether, and then he'll be fine. And then as I got older, I got more frustrated with the system, right? And feeling like the system was the problem, and it was because of the system that he was struggling and suffering. So first I blamed him, then I blamed the system. At some points, I blamed myself. Like maybe if I had been a more blah, 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 whatever. At some points, I blamed my parents, right? So there was all of this like wanting to assign blame somewhere of why this person seems to constantly get the short end of the stick, constantly seems to be suffering and struggling. And that blame game didn't really help me. And it definitely didn't help him, right? Where it was coming from was this part of me that wanted to understand, right? See, the mind is a meaning-making machine. It likes to understand things and make stories about why things are happening the way they are. Even when they make no sense, we want to make sense of it, right? And so over the last few years, I've really been, maybe 5 or 6 years, I've really been transforming that, trying to make sense of it, and looking at it from a more spiritual perspective and a more like, a deeper way, right? Rather than like the logical mind trying to figure out why somebody, seems to have it all and somebody seems to be constantly struggling, to go beyond the logic of that. Because it is not logical and it is not fair. And so the human mind cannot grasp when something is there's so much disparity. So I had to go a little bit deeper. And so for me, what I've really come to is, what is the call here? So Chuck Spezzano talks about this, right? That there are only two things that people do. This is what he talks about. There's only two things that people do. Any action is either a demonstration of love or a call for love. I'm going to say that again. Any action is either a demonstration of love or a call for love. And so when I framed it that way, which is the way that the Course in Miracles frames this seeming unfairness, right, that we see in the human experience, is that every action is either a demonstration of love or a call for love. Well, then that changes the whole story, Because now it's not about judging and making things right or wrong, and saying this is good or bad, but saying, okay, so what am I called to do here in this situation, right? If there's a call for love that's showing up in front of me, can I respond to that call for love? Can I respond to that call for love? And, I'm seeing this in world events where people around the world are waking up and responding and saying, there's some terrible things that are happening out there, and I'm going to be the one to respond to, not add to the chaos, not add to the problem, but actually find solutions. Even if they're in my tiny corner of the world, right? Maybe my solution is simply, and this is something I've been doing, is sending love and healing and hope to all of those who are fighting on the front lines. Yeah. So, and supporting those who are getting tired, to be a resource for those who need somebody to bounce ideas off of, right? So I know for me, in this moment in time, my calling is not necessarily on the front lines. I think about, during the whole COVID thing, there were the frontline workers, and the society, we tried to kind of rally around those frontline people to say, okay, we know you're the ones who are doing this work. How can we support you? And so some of us will be on the front lines in world events, and some of us will be the supporters of those that are in the front lines. But all of us are involved. All of us are involved, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we choose to act on it or not. We are one, right? If everything that happens on this planet is a reflection of my own inner state, okay, well then, wow, then that's saying something. If everything that happens on this planet is a reflection of my inner state, well, then I've got some work to do. And so do you. We've got some cleaning up to do, my friends. If we want to see a shift in our families, in our communities, in our countries, and in the world, then we've got to do some serious, honest inventory about what's happening here. Yeah. How loving am I to myself? How loving am I to my closest circle, in my closest circle? And it's not loving the way that I was taught, right? It's not like I have to have this big heart and then I have to give from this big heart. No, it's actually, I have to be a channel and a vessel to let that love come through me into the world. So it's not my own personal love that's tainted with my own stories and expectations and judgments and the give or take of human relationships. It's a divine love that comes through. So those that are harder to love, those who kind of keep getting the coal, could I even love them? Could I even extend towards them? And I know this is a radical concept because everything in our training, everything in our media, in our movies, in our books, in our stories, there's always a bad guy, right? And what we do is we identify the bad guy and then we, shut that bad guy down somehow and then everybody's fine. Well, that's just not how it works. That's just not how it works. There are people with destructive behaviors and dysfunctional behaviors because they're out of alignment. Absolutely, yes. But put that person away somewhere and another one will pop up, because we don't talk about what's required to live a balanced, peaceful, rich, and authentic life. We just don't talk about that. What's required is a true surrender to love. And I know I sound a bit hokey when I say that. I know I do, but it's the truth. A true surrender to love, which means, could I see everything around me through the eyes of love? It's a radical concept. It's absolutely game-changing, though, once we implement it, because when we start looking at the world through the eyes of love, and that way only, what we start to see transforms. So even the difficulties, even the tragedies, we start to see different elements of those that we totally miss when we're coming from that judgmental mind of right and wrong, good or bad, yes or no. That duality that our survival brain keeps us locked in. when we bypass, when we move from here to here, when we move from our survival brain and our problem solving mind into alignment and into a heart space, well, then everything changes. So if you're following what I'm talking about, if you think this is making sense to you, I'd love to hear a comment from you about how you do that. How do you move from judgment to love? What do you do when you get stuck in judgment? How do you bring yourself out of it? Um, Also, check out our community at theexpansionproject.com. We are gathering people who want to have these kind of really philosophical, really transformational conversations that don't allow us any longer to play the blame game, to keep us, to just bust us out of all of that, and to take accountability and responsibility for what we can do and our part, and then going into the world and doing that, actually taking action around that. So, I invite you to join us, to check out our community, and keep watching the videos. See you next time.